the war cabinet minister, Benny Gantz, who is his rival, but nevertheless part of the government, also said that there's no need to create this rift with the United States over the Security Council resolution, because if you look at what's actually in the resolution, it is much better for Israel, the terms there, than what they're currently trying to negotiate with Hamas.
Israel has pulled out of a meeting in Washington after the US didn't veto a ceasefire vote in the UN. Let's get a sense of how big an issue this is with the journalist Jotam Confino. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
The relationship with America and Israel is a very strong one. And throughout this terrible situation that started on October the 7th, or the current situation that we find ourselves in, America has very much been an ally of Israel. I think that's fair to say. But something seems to be shifting for them not to veto this ceasefire vote. What's your understanding of what has changed?
Well, what's changed is really that the United States is fed up with Benjamin Netanyahu. That's the short answer. The Biden administration, for well over a year now, has really lashed out at Netanyahu's government, their handling of everything from judicial reforms to the Gaza war, and now they're paying the price. Netanyahu has single-handedly created some sort of a crisis between Israel and the United States when there really needs to be no crisis. That's the truth of it all. And that's why he's being criticized not only by the opposition, but also internally in his government. The war cabinet minister, Benny Gantz, who is his rival, but nevertheless part of the government, also said that there's no need to create this rift with the United States over the Security Council resolution, because if you look at what's actually in the resolution, it is much better for Israel, the terms there, than what they're currently trying to negotiate with Hamas. So this is all political spin. Netanyahu is doing this to appease his voter base and to come off as a strong man who can say no, not only to the United Nations, but also to the United States.
So why then do people think that Benjamin Netanyahu is digging in and possibly alienating his biggest ally?
Because simply, he's, first of all, extremely unpopular in Israel right now. So he's doing everything he can to regain popularity. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to, first of all, stand up against the United Nations. The United Nations is incredibly unpopular among Israelis for many reasons. It's been extremely anti-Israel for many years, and their handling of the aftermath of October 7th has also been quite critical in a way. So if you want some cheap points among your right-wing voters, it's very easy to go out and stand up against the United Nations. Sometimes it's also popular to stand up against the United States, believe it or not. There are some who believe that Joe Biden hasn't done enough for Israel. It's quite an ungrateful thing to believe, really. But nevertheless, there are some Israelis believe that the United States shouldn't have abstained from this vote. They shouldn't put any restrictions on Israel's handling of the war in Gaza. They want just a carte blanche to do whatever Israel needs to do in Gaza, and that's not how the world works.
Well, I mean, that was going to be my next question, which is that it may be popular among some people to stand up against the UN and indeed the US, but you said yourself that the wording of this particular ceasefire vote was not that much of an issue.
Not at all, and that's what's interesting here. Anyone who looks at the facts will see that this is political spin by Netanyahu. If Israel and Hamas were to abide by this resolution, all 134 hostages would be released immediately. That is much better than what Israel is currently looking at in a horrible negotiation with Hamas, where only 40 hostages were said to be released. Now, Hamas is, they have basically turned down that offer this morning, so it's not going to happen anyway. But if Israel were to act in the nation's interest, they would say, fine, let's do the ceasefire, 6 weeks, which is basically what they're negotiating now, and then we'll get all of our hostages back. It's a no-brainer, really. The fact that the UN isn't condemning Hamas, that in itself is, of course, appalling. But again, it's more important to get the hostages out than to discuss semantics in a resolution.
What do you think happens next? Not just in terms of negotiations, but in terms of the future relationship between America and Israel?
I think, first of all, it's important to stress that the bond between the United States and Israel is stronger than the leaders and the relationship between them. Now, that being said, the two leaders and bad relationship between them can certainly drag the relationship down. We saw that between also Netanyahu and Obama. And this is also what's happening now. But I don't think anyone believes that Netanyahu will stay in power for that much longer, which means that eventually he'll be gone and everything will go back to normal. You'll have a solid relationship between the US and Israel. What's happening right now is a bad relationship between two leaders, not between the two countries and their shared values and their shared interests. It's between two leaders, and that's important to stress, I think.
Itamar Rabinovich is the former Israeli ambassador to the US and chief negotiator for Israel with Syria in the 1990s. He's currently president of Tel Aviv University, and we can speak to him now. Good morning, Itamar.
Good morning.
How much do you regard the US as shifting its position when it comes to its support for Israel?
Not a shift of position, but an escalation of pressure. There are policy differences on the way how to proceed with the war and how to conclude the war and how to fit it into a new regional order at the end of the war. These differences vary from the major to more specific issues of policy, like should Israel also capture Rafah and complete the military defeat of Hamas, or should it not? So these are the issues over which the Biden administration and the Netanyahu government disagree. There is a growing impatience by the Biden administration with Netanyahu, a sense of lack of gratitude, given the huge support offered by the Biden administration to Israel from day one in the war, a sense that domestic political considerations are clouding Netanyahu's judgment, and this is escalating.
Do you accept that Netanyahu has conducted this war poorly? I mean, many people, almost everyone, would recognize the need for Israel to respond to the terrorist attack against them on October the 7th. But the manner of the pursuit of that aim, the nature of the bombing, the level of civilian deaths in Gaza, the continuation of it despite criticism, has seemed to gradually isolate Israel more and more and more. Do you regard the conduct of the war, the way Netanyahu has pursued the war, to have been a mistake?
The problem is that there was no neat or elegant way of conducting this war. This is part of the tragedy in the situation. As you said yourself, this all began with a horrific terrorist attack to which Israel must have responded. And given the fact that Hamas is embedded in Gaza and uses the population as a human shield, there was no way of getting Hamas without causing civilian casualties. This is a dilemma that Israel has faced for several years. So the launching of the war itself and a response to Hamas is not something I criticize Netanyahu for, but given the fact that this has now taken 6 months, and other aspects of the conduct of the war, I think are not up to par. Israel could have used a greater leader to conduct such a complex war. Remember also.
I was interested to know what you mean. What bits do you think are not work? Where would you criticize Netanyahu?
Well, there is first of all, this is a war that is also conducted at a lower level by Hezbollah in the north. This is, in fact, not just an Israel-Hamas war. This is an Iranian-Israeli war in which Iran is using 5 different proxies all the way down to Yemen in the south against Israel. So conducting the war and conducting the very deep crisis caused by the fact that more than 200 Israelis were taken hostage by Hamas, and more than 100 of them are still held in subhuman conditions. This is agitating, justifiably so, the Israeli public. So conducting this multi-front war and dealing with the international and regional ramifications is a huge issue. And the feeling among many in Israel is that Netanyahu is not doing a good job of managing it. He is not David Ben-Gurion in Israeli terms and not Winston Churchill in British terms.
You've been involved in negotiations in the past. Is a negotiated settlement possible, do you feel? Do you think the hostages are going to come home? Because it's been 6 months. Israel wants to sort of bomb Hamas into submission, which is a very difficult thing to do, not least because many of the leadership are not in Gaza. It's very hard to kill an idea as much as it is an organization. With all that going on, with the international community turning on Israel, I think it's fair to say, is there a pathway to a negotiated settlement here still?
Not with Hamas. Hamas is not a partner for settlement. A settlement can be made with the Palestinian Authority, with the moderate Arab states like Saudi Arabia and the Emirates. Actually, President Biden put on the table a complete plan for reorganizing the region, and this could have been a way out of the war. But Netanyahu is constrained by the fact that he has radical right-wing partners in his government that by dealing with the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and bringing it to Gaza, he will probably lose his government, and he's hanging on to power. When Americans and others and Israelis among them say that Netanyahu is governed by domestic political or personal political considerations, this is what they have in mind. But the issue is not to bomb Hamas out of existence. The thing is, if you want the Gaza Strip to become a normal place, as it could have been since Israel left it in 2007, you need to have Hamas out. If you think of what Hamas perpetrated on October 7, you understand, as many do, including President Biden, that you do not want to have Hamas as an actor in the Gaza Strip or anywhere else when this war is concluded.